Hey everyone, Juan Dhas here, and welcome to this week's lesson video where I'm covering, or rather doing a small extension of last week's lesson video on chord melody basics, but this time I'm talking about the little details, or the other stuff. As always, if you enjoy what I'm doing, please do like and subscribe to the channel. It really means an absolute ton and helps me keep making more content for you guys, whether it be educational or musical. So let's just get into it. Now, just to quickly recap on last week's video, and I'm going to put the link somewhere, probably a card up here, so if you want to check it out in more detail, you can. But a quick recap is there are three main pillars of chord melody playing that are essential to have down first before you start thinking of how to flesh out and create an interesting arrangement. This would be your melody. Obviously, this is the most important factor. If your melody is not there, everything will kind of fall apart. Your harmony, also important, and your rhythmic interpretation, which is how are you going to play this? Are you going to play this rubato? Are you going to play it in time? And if you're playing it in time, what style are you playing? What musical style are you deciding to follow? So once you have that in mind, that'll influence your decision and for the most part kind of start building the framework of your arrangement. But then I touched on a fourth segment, or a fourth pillar, if you will, which is all your other stuff. It's kind of your bells and whistles, your details, if you will. And these are small little things, but as they add up, they help add dimension and depth to, well, your arrangement. So there are many, many things you could possibly use to start looking at how to make your arrangement a little more interesting. But I'm going to touch on three main ones that I see pop up quite a lot, or that I'm consciously thinking about as I'm coming up with chord melody arrangements, whether it be something that I'm composing or whether I'm improvising. So first off, I look at my melody and I see where are my spaces, because this can allow me to insert, I don't know, maybe transition phrases, or how to accentuate the melody, how to really prepare the melody and treat it. So for the sake of continuity, I'm going to use I'll Be Seeing You again, just so we have an idea of what can be done with this tune. Now, let's say, okay, one thing I see happen a lot is people come up with an arrangement and it'll kind of be an interpretation where the harmony always lines up with the melody. That's great. It's an effect, but overused, it can start to sound a little monotonous. So basically, I start using the spaces in the phrasing of the melody to insert transitional phrases that will help arrive at a melody or move away from one phrase and go to the next. So let's say, right, that opening phrase. Maybe one option is just to play the melody as is. Or, let's say I could prepare that initial note. Now, these preparations can be harmonic, they can be melodic, whatever you want. And you see how I added that little passing note there to add a little bit more dimension to it, almost as if I'm a piano player playing around with inner voicings, or sorry, inner voices of the chords. And you see here, I'm using the space of that melody note. That's beat one, but I'm not playing the chord on the downbeat. I'm letting that note hang a little and then putting a chord in that little gap. So this adds a little more dimension, and if you treat it like a painting, it's like you have something in the foreground, but you have the background, so there's a little more depth, and further enhances the difference between your accompaniment and your melodic playing, right? Or let's say I could do in that space a harmonic idea. I could do. I'm just playing around with dyads there. Or even just to arrive at the opening melody, I could do a little harmonic motion. But notice I'm leaving space to kind of let that melody sit a little more. And that little inflection there isn't naturally a part of the melody, but I'm taking advantage of space wherever I can. And I'm not trying to put too much into one space. I'm not trying to overcrowd the melody. I'm just picking my spots as best as I can. So that's one thing you can do. Next, I would consider texture. And again, bear in mind, I'm not doing this in any particular order. This just happens to be stuff I'll think about as I go. So texture. Texture could be how I play the whole arrangement, or even the textures and sounds I use for chordal playing. So my textures, I can use block chords, I can use counterpoint and have a polyphonic sound. I can treat everything as single notes. So for example, let's say I wanted to do a single note version of I'll Be Seeing You, and have a sort of counterpoint effect. Right? That's a different sound. It's something I can think about, or I can intersperse that inside an arrangement somewhere. Use that effect of or I can have the notes ring into each other on that chord if I want to accentuate it a little more. Right? That's another thing. Maybe if I want more bell-like texture, things like that. Play around with your textures a little bit to see what effects you can come up with and how they accentuate different parts of the melody. You'll find you'll be able to elicit different responses, emotionally speaking, and also just kind of help the melody speak a little more. So lastly, I want to touch on dynamics, and I would say this is arguably the most important. If you don't even touch the rest of it, take a look at dynamics, because this will allow your performance to breathe. Sometimes people can have a very flat dynamic response, and that's great. Again, it can be an effect, but you don't create so much of a journey in the tune. So let's take that little arrangement I came up with earlier, or just that transitional phrase of, see, I had a crescendo going up towards that and then immediately backed off to kind of just call attention to that one melody note. And made the inner voice sound much quieter than the melody. So again, further talking about that difference between melody and accompaniment. Just playing around with how loud or how soft you play is enough to really call attention to the melody and call attention to specific sections. So I'm just going to leave you with those 3 basic ideas to work with, because there's a lot you can extract from that. There are obviously many different areas and many different techniques you can use, and I'm not even getting into reharm yet, but maybe I can do another video on an individual topic later. Just let me know in the comments. So I hope this lesson was useful for you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.